The Milwaukee Bucks might have f***ed up colossally by hiring Doc Rivers. Since Doc Rivers became the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, they have gone 3-7, and it's safe to say that so far things have not gone according to plan. The 3 wins that the Bucks have recorded since Doc has been head coach have been against a Kyrie-less Mavs. Luka still went off for 40 points in that game, by the way. A bottom-of-the-barrel Eastern Conference Hornets team without LaMelo Ball, and a Denver Nuggets team who had Jamal Murray score only 3 points in 18 minutes before sitting out in the second half due to a calf shin splint, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope playing only 9 minutes before leaving with a right hamstring injury. So those 3 specific wins have not been entirely impressive either. A large part of the reason for the Milwaukee Bucks bringing in Doc Rivers in the first place was to help bolster the Bucks defense after their pedestrian start to the 2023-2024 campaign, where they ranked 23rd overall based on a points allowed per game average. Now, through their first 10 games, their defense has improved slightly, allowing only an average of 113 points per game. That's down from 116 points per game, but it's worth noting that during this 10-game stretch, they've only held 3 teams to under 100 points. Now, Doc Rivers has only been the coach for 10 games, and he was thrown in mid-season, so it would be ridiculous to put all of the blame on him. So who does this blame go to? How did the Bucks even get here in the first place? Well, to answer that, we have to go back to the year 2021. The Milwaukee Bucks are facing off against the Phoenix Suns in the 2021 NBA Finals, and they have just came back down from an 0-2 deficit against the Phoenix Suns to win 4 games straight and secure their first NBA championship since 1971. Giannis finally overcame the hurdle to become an NBA championship and make it to the promised land, winning his first long-awaited chip. And as an organization who just won their first title in 50 years, you do the obvious and most sensible thing you can at the time, and you re-sign the head coach that got you there to a contract extension. So not long after the championship win, Mike Budenholzer signed a 3-year contract extension in the summer of 2021 that would pay him an $8 million a year salary, and the contract would run through the 2024-2025 season. But after losing to the Boston Celtics in the 2022 Eastern Conference semifinals in a series that went all the way to a Game 7, the Bucks would look to start the process all over again and hope to come back the next year to be able to try to win it all. And they came back stronger than ever, because in the 2022-2023 NBA season, the Milwaukee Bucks would go 58-24, which gave them the #1 spot in the Eastern Conference and the best overall record in the entire NBA. With the way the Bucks were playing, there were high hopes and large expectations that they would be able to make it back to the NBA Finals and be able to compete for their second title in 3 years. But after the #1 seeded Bucks, who won 58 games in the regular season, lost in the first round to the 8th seeded Miami Heat, who barely scraped into the playoffs through the in-season tournament, the Bucks would go on to announce that their head coach, Mike Budenholzer, would be fired. In just 2 years of coming off an NBA championship and signing a contract extension, Mike Budenholzer, who had just been a head coach in Milwaukee for 5 years up to that point, had been let go, and his replacement was NBA assistant and would-be first-time head coach Adrian Griffin. Now, up until this point, Adrian Griffin had been an NBA assistant for 16 seasons, with the last 5 seasons being with the Toronto Raptors, and things started off extremely rocky since the beginning of his tenure, with reports of Griffin not seeing eye to eye with certain players and assistant coach Terry Stotts. Now, Terry Stotts was a key piece of the staff who was brought in specifically to help transition Damian Lillard's offensive arsenal into the Bucks scheme, but things were ultimately brought to a boiling point when Stotts straight up left the Bucks coaching staff less than a week before the season started due to not seeing eye to eye with Adrian Griffin. Red flag number 1. Red flag number 2. In the 2023-2024 season, the Bucks would decrease overall in their defensive rating, which was partially expected due to losing Drew Bledsoe, but no one could have expected it to be this bad, because the Bucks slipped from an overall 4th defensive rating all the way to 21st in the league. And this reduction in defensive rating was starting to take its toll, because at this point, Giannis and other players had outwardly shown frustration on multiple occasions, and there were rumors of multiple player meetings being had to sort through the issues that the Bucks were having internally at this point. But despite all the internal issues that the Bucks were having, they were still winning games. Now, they weren't winning games in the convincing fashion that was expected with the tandem of Giannis and Lillard by any means, but they still managed to secure a record that would sit them at the 3rd spot in the Eastern Conference, right below the Boston Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers. But despite this, it looked like Adrian Griffin had lost the locker room entirely. So the Milwaukee Bucks made an unprecedented decision and fired their head coach Adrian Griffin 43 games into the season while still being 3rd in the East and having a 30-13 record. And to make matters even funnier, they announced his replacement in Doc Rivers, who was acting as a consultant for the team, on the same day. This was only the 2nd time a coach with a winning record had been fired this early, and honestly, I don't think I can remember a time in recent memory where a coach had been fired after only 43 games in his rookie year as a head coach. So now, not only are the Bucks currently still on the hook for Mike Budenholzer's salary, with $16 million still being owed to him, but now they have to pay the remaining salary for Adrian Griffin as well, who is still owed $12 million, and now they have to pay their new coach Doc Rivers on top of everything else. Doc Rivers signed a 4-year, $40 million contract, and it's pretty clear that they couldn't wait to get Adrian Griffin's ass out of there with the quickness, because they literally announced the hiring of Doc Rivers on the same day that they fired him. And side note, I seriously think that Doc Rivers must have some sort of serious dirt on one of the NBA owners or Adam Silver himself, because Doc Rivers keeps getting head coaching jobs after blundering playoff series after playoff series and blowing 3-1 leads year after year. And I don't know how he keeps getting these jobs, honestly. Doc Rivers has been a head coach for the Boston Celtics, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Philadelphia 76ers, and obviously most recently the Milwaukee Bucks. He has 2 finals appearances and won his first and only title in 2008 with the stacked Boston Celtics team full of Hall of Fame players against the Los Angeles Lakers, then lost a second rematch against the Los Angeles Lakers again in the 2010 finals. But since this point, his playoff performance has been absolutely abysmal. Doc Rivers was the head coach for the Los Angeles Clippers for 7 years and made the playoffs for 6 years out of those 7. In those 6 years, the Clippers never managed to make it past the second round of the playoffs, despite having talent such as Blake Griffin in his prime, Chris Paul, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. Not to mention, Doc Rivers is the king of not making adjustments and not being able to close out series, because with the Clippers, he blew a 3-1 lead twice. Once against the Houston Rockets in the 2015 Western Conference semifinals, and again against the Denver Nuggets in the 2020 Western Conference semifinals. Then after that, he was traded to the 76ers, and I didn't even know coaches could be traded. And as a coach for the 76ers, he blew another 3-1 lead against the Boston Celtics with Joel Embiid and the system. And to make things even crazier, in the NBA, playoff teams have only come back from a 3-1 deficit 13 times, which means that literally 23%, almost a quarter of all 3-1 comebacks have been against a team led by Doc Rivers. So now the Milwaukee Bucks are in a mess of a situation where they're literally playing 3 coaches at the same time, they barely improved defensively, and now they have to go through the growing pains of having to learn a new system under a new head coach midway through the season. And it's clear that with this 3-7 start, that so far they're struggling to find their identity under Doc Rivers. So add all of this on top of the fact that you have now hired a replacement head coach who has not shown that he has been able to take an extremely talented team to the mountaintop in the past and hasn't been to an NBA finals in over a decade, and I think you have a recipe for disaster. So it's clear that the Bucks up. And right now, morale is so low that you have your superstar player in Giannis saying this, and you have your new head coach copying please and saying this.
We had some guys here, we had some guys in Cabo.
So I want to know what you think. Who's to blame in the situation? Is it the ownership? Is it general manager? Is it the players? And is this just the growing pains of getting a new head coach midway through the season? Can the Bucks figure this out the way the Los Angeles Clippers seem to have figured this out? Or are the Bucks just destined to go to the playoffs, blow a 3-1 lead, and end up firing Doc Rivers? Anyways, don't forget to comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and I'm out.